Hello, welcome to this short overview about the ISupport rights-based standards, aiming to improve children's experiences of undergoing tests, treatments, examinations and interventions. So why does ISupport matter? So ISupport is important because we know that despite research, publications and guidance, there's been limited progress or improvements to procedural practice in the last 20 years. And whilst many children have positive experiences of coming for procedures, unfortunately, many do not. Children continue to report feeling ignored, not listened to, not given choices about their care, and we know that children continue to experience upset and distress, and the research shows that children continue to be frequently held for non-urgent procedures in order to get procedures done. We know younger children and children with additional needs are even more likely to experience holding and to experience exclusion from decisions around their care. We know that poor procedural experiences can have short-term impacts, both on children, parents and the professionals caring for them, but also we're understanding more about the lifelong impacts of some of these poor procedural experiences, with children reporting an inability to be able to come back within healthcare services, unable to engage in public health programs, and some children and young people living with long-term trauma as a result of the harm that they've experienced within healthcare practice. We know that practice continues to be underpinned by some of the common myths that we tell ourselves around children, in that it is best just to get a procedure done quickly, despite using holding, that mum and dad say it's best just to get something done, that a child's too young to understand, that a child will not sit still and is going to cry anyway. So there's lots of narratives that we tell ourselves around children coming for procedures. I think it's really important to hear first from Katie Dixon, who's the young person who prompted ISupport in the first place.
Since I was 18 months old and throughout my childhood, I've experienced a lot of bad experiences with medical procedures. I've been held down for anaesthetics, had procedures rushed and not been told what was happening, and felt ignored during them. These memories have overshadowed the happiness kids should have. My mum noticed something was wrong early on and tried to get me help. But the healthcare team didn't listen until it was too late. I was always too young to remember anything in the medical professional's eyes. I became distressed, distant and depressed as a child. After so many bad experiences, I started to refuse medical help, have nightmares, and each visit was distressing beyond belief. It's not just hard for me, but for my family and nurses too. It's affected my life in so many ways, my schooling, friendships, and just having fun as a child, and even through my teenage years. Now, at 23, I've tried everything to cope, but still need medication for every visit to help calm me. I can't go alone, I avoid the emergency room, and it limits my treatment options for my health condition. It'll even make having my own children difficult because of the procedures involved in that. I feel alone, misunderstood and judged. Every medical visit leaves me a mess, even now. I am proof that one badly handled procedure can have lasting effects, but also many can really mess up a person's life. I wish my trauma would go away, but now I just have to learn to live with it.
So we can hear there about the long-term impact that a poorly managed procedure or poorly managed procedures can have on a child or young person as they grow up. So Katie prompted ISupport, and it started from a few of us to grow to be an international collaboration of over 50 experts made up of multidisciplinary professionals, most importantly young people and parents, and we embarked upon a 2-year development process, initially starting from looking to define what we meant by supportive and restraining holds, but it very quickly broadened its focus based on young people and parents telling us that actually there was so much more that needed to be right within a procedure and needed to be managed well within a procedure to give them a positive experience and outcome. So our first stage, we had a draft of the standards. We then consulted widely around the statements that we were focusing the standards on. And then we got another draft, and then we went back for a year and managed to consult more broadly with more children and young people, more professionals, and more parents, and we manage to engage with children and young people who are often excluded from having their views shared as part of developing guidance and standards. So what are the standards? Well, they're based for all children and young people aged 0 to 18 years, having tests, treatments, examinations and interventions based on internationally agreed children's rights set out by their United Nations Conventions of the Rights of the Child. And this is all things that happen within paediatric practice every day, from having a blood pressure, temperature taken, being given medication, sitting down and talking with a healthcare professional, to having surgery, having a scan. They also apply for all children and young people, because we know children don't suddenly gain rights overnight when they turn 7 or 11. All children and young people have rights. The standards aim to ensure that the short and long-term physical, emotional and psychological well-being of children and young people are of central importance in any decision-making for procedures or procedural practice. And we propose an approach to minimise the anxiety, distress and harm experienced by children, and really focus on establishing trust with children having procedures. So what are the standards about? Also, we were really keen that the standards would be a platform to enable people to challenge the use of restraining holds. So we know health professionals do not come to work to restrain children, but it happens. And so the standards hopefully support professionals to be brave enough to acknowledge where restraint has been used, to look for ways that we can reduce that. And if it has happened, how can we mitigate any harms and how can we learn from that so that the next time we're thinking differently about our practice. So for restraint to be openly acknowledged and documented. We have got consensus definitions of supportive and restraining holds. And the standards really act as really broad principles which apply for all children across all clinical and healthcare settings. And we hope that teams then feel able to pick up these principles and think about how does this look like for the children coming through our department, ward, outpatients, surgery pathway. What does that look like for children we see? The standards are a 4-page PDF document for professionals, and I'm just going to briefly give an overview of the 6 principles which underpin them. The first is that the child has rights to be cared for by professionals who have got the appropriate knowledge and skills to support their physical, emotional and psychological well-being and rights before, during and after the procedure or intervention. So this is really talking to the fact of, are the right people in the room? Are there professionals there who've got the right knowledge and skills, the correct equipment and resources? Is the test absolutely needed? Are there people there who will holistically be able to care for that child? A child's got rights to be communicated with in a way which supports them to express, whether verbally or behaviourally, their views and feelings, and for the views and feelings to be listened to, but not just listened to, but taken seriously and acted upon. So are we working with children to communicate with them based in an open and honest way, based on their abilities and their preferences? So we've really young children, children who may be non-verbal, children who may rely on us as health professionals to pick up cues from their behaviour as to what they're feeling and what their views are. A child's got rights to be provided with meaningful, individualised and easy to understand information to help them prepare and develop skills to help them cope with their procedure or intervention. So are we giving appropriate information to children and young people? And that can be through lots of different ways, not just a leaflet, but verbally or in written ways. Are we talking to children and young people in a way that they can understand what is going to happen? And for very, very young children, are we enabling their parents to be coached and have the skills and know what's going to happen so that they can support their child? The child's got rights to be supported to make procedural choices and decisions, and for these choices to be acted upon to help them gain some control over their procedure or intervention. So it may be that children don't have the opportunity to make a big decision, such as whether to have surgery or a blood test. But within that experience, there's always something where children can have some control over a choice. So what distraction method works for them? What works for them in the way that the room's set up? And so that we're developing these skills in children from an early age, we're encouraging them to learn how to make choices and learn that their voice and their opinions matter within procedural care. A child has rights for their short and long-term best interests and well-being to be a priority in all decisions. So this is speaking to the fact that a child's short-term best interests, we sometimes say, well, it's best just to get the blood test done. But actually, is that best for that child's long-term best interest? So next time that child has to come for a blood test, is there anything that we're doing today that's going to make that more difficult? And so it's thinking about our actions, decisions, both in the short term, but also in the long term. And we should be prioritising children's short and long-term best interests over those of their parents, those of the professionals, and those of institutional demands. A child's got rights to be positioned for a procedure or intervention in a supportive hold if needed and should not be held against their will. So here we define a supportive hold as one where a child feels calm, secure and settled. If they're being held supportively, they've agreed to the procedure and positioning or are not expressing signs of refusal. So if we have an infant crying, if we have a toddler kicking out or laying on the floor crying, if we have an older child saying, no, please stop, they're expressing signs of refusal, and how we hold them, that is not supportive because they're not calm, secure and settled. That would be a restraining hold, which is defined as any action to prevent a child moving freely against their choice or will whilst expressing signs of refusal. And we should be brave enough as professionals to recognise when we are using restraining holds. And as I mentioned earlier, we should be recording them, acknowledging them and learning from those examples. We have a version of the standards for professionals, a version for families, a comic version for children and young people. We have a symbol-based version for those children and young people who find that easier to understand. We have case studies which show a range of procedural experiences of children of different ages and different procedures, and all of our statements are underpinned by evidence. Children and young people challenged us to think about how they could use the standards in practice, so what that looked like for them having a healthcare procedure. And so we worked with children and young people to develop a prep sheet which enables them to bring their ideas and their thoughts to a procedural encounter. There's also a symbol-based version for children and young people to share what works for them, what doesn't work for them, things that support them. Recently launched the ISupport checklist, and this has been designed to help teams and professionals just pause before a procedure is started and just check, are all things in place to support a child to have the most positive experience? This is based on patient and safety initiatives that shows that checklists can be really helpful just to make sure that there's a shared approach to how a procedure is done before it is started. The standards have been translated into various languages. These are all available on our website. I think it's really important to mention about how overwhelming it can feel for clinical teams who are working often within quite constrained services, often with a lack of resources. It can feel quite overwhelming for how we can actually start to affect change and improve practice. So we worked with children, parents and professionals to develop some self-report audit tools. There's a tool for children aged 6 to 18, a tool for parents, and one for professionals to report and think about how their delivery of care maps against the standards. This is really helpful because it will highlight things that work well, things that are good practice within services, and maybe highlight where maybe there's an opportunity to think about improvements. So this helps us focus on where we can make the quick wins, where we can make the biggest difference. To accompany these self-report audit tools, we also have a walk-through audit tool, which enables staff to follow through a child, through their service, and see what that looks like from their perspective, from the minute that they enter into a department or ward to the moment that they have had their procedure completed. So ISupport has resources and aims to support the multiple levels which are associated with when a child is having a procedure, something simple like having a blood pressure taken. We have resources there to help children share their views and what works for them, as well as knowing their rights and reporting against the standards. We have the resources for parents. We have resources for health professionals, for them to think about the practice that they're involved in delivering. This is really important because sometimes it's challenging culture and challenging organisations and accepted practice as to how we can best serve children's rights. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please take 2 minutes to share your views about watching the video using this short QR code. And please also check out our website where all the resources that we have are free to use and download. Thanks so much for listening.